Welcome back to Rapture Tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. The morning of Elena Moore's wedding arrived with deceptive calm, the kind that felt too polished to be real. Sunlight spilled across the stone terrace of the estate, illuminating rows of white chairs arranged with mathematical precision, each one facing an altar framed by soft florals and glass arches. Inside the bridal suite, Elena stood still as stylists moved around her, adjusting fabric and fastening pearls. Her reflection stared back at her with a quiet steadiness that masked the storm beneath. This wedding had been planned for months, yet she felt as though something unseen was already unraveling. Not fear. She trusted herself too much of that, but an instinctive alertness, the same one her mother had taught her to listen to when something wasn't right. Elena thought of Ruth, her mother, who had raised her with gentle firmness, never demanding admiration, never announcing strength. Ruth believed dignity spoke for itself. Elena smiled at that thought, grounding herself. Whatever happened today, she would not lose herself in it. Ruth Moore arrived early, as she always did. She preferred spaces before they filled with people and noise, when walls still seemed to listen. Her dress was simple and elegant, chosen not to impress but to honor the moment. She walked through the venue with measured steps, acknowledging staff with warmth that came naturally to her. The estate was familiar, though few would have guessed why. Ruth had learned long ago that ownership did not require announcement. She took her seat near the front, close enough to see her daughter's face clearly when she walked down the aisle. As she settled in, she noticed the way certain guests glanced at her and then away. Curiosity quickly replaced by dismissal. She did not mind. Being underestimated had become a strange form of protection over the years. Julian Moore's family arrived later, loud in presence, if not volume. They moved as though the venue were an extension of themselves, inspecting details, commenting freely, asserting belonging. They had spoken endlessly about the prestige of the estate, the difficulty of securing it, how it reflected their social standing. When they noticed Ruth seated prominently, confusion flickered into irritation. She did not look like someone they had imagined being connected to Elena in that way. Too quiet, too plain, too unremarkable. Whispers passed between them, sharp and quick. Julian's mother frowned. His aunts leaned together, and a decision was made without consultation or conscience. They approached Ruth with smiles that carried no warmth, framing cruelty as concern. They spoke of appearances, of important guests, of how seating arrangements needed adjustment. At first, Ruth thought it was a misunderstanding. Then the implication sharpened. She was asked to move, then told she should not be seen so close to the front. When she resisted gently, the tone hardened. Embarrassment was mentioned. Reputation. Ruth understood then. She rose slowly, smoothing her dress, refusing to give them the satisfaction of protest. Her eyes moved briefly toward the aisle, imagining Elena's walk, committing it to memory in case she did not see it clearly later. Then she stepped away, her back straight, her dignity untouched though her heart ached. Elena sensed something was wrong before anyone spoke to her. When she saw her mother standing alone near the side exit, confusion turned instantly to anger. She crossed the hall quickly, calling out to her. Ruth tried to reassure her, minimizing what had happened, but Elena saw the truth in the careful calm of her voice. The explanation did not matter. The disrespect did. Elena turned to Julian, demanding answers. He hesitated, then admitted his family had concerns, that they found Ruth's presence uncomfortable, that he had hoped it would pass without conflict. He spoke of peace as though silence were not a betrayal. Elena looked at him and felt something shift. Not love disappearing, but illusion dissolving. She told him to continue with the ceremony. Her calm unsettled him. The ceremony unfolded flawlessly. Guests admired the setting, unaware of the quiet fracture beneath the surface. Elena walked down the aisle with grace, her face serene, her mind clear. She exchanged vows with Julian, her words sincere yet weighted with meaning. She spoke of respect, of unity, of choosing courage even when it was difficult. Julian echoed her, not realizing how closely those words were being measured. Ruth watched from a distance, pride and sadness entwined, trusting her daughter in a way only a mother could. At the reception, Elena moved with purpose. When it was time to speak, she took the microphone and thanked everyone warmly. Then she spoke of her upbringing, of being taught that worth did not need performance. She acknowledged her mother publicly, shifting attention where it had been denied. Then, without raising her voice, she revealed the truth. The venue belonged to her mother's family, and the estate many of Julian's relatives lived on was partially owned by the same woman they had humiliated. The room fell silent. Faces drained. Calculations replaced confidence. Apologies came quickly, clumsy, and self-serving. Elena listened and refused them. She demanded a public apology to her mother, not out of revenge, but out of principle. Some complied awkwardly. Ruth accepted with grace, not because they deserved forgiveness, but because bitterness had never shaped her life. The power in the room had shifted permanently. Later, alone with Julian, Elena spoke plainly. His silence had been a choice, and it had consequences. He promised change, distance from his family, growth. Elena listened but did not rush to comfort him. She understood now that the wedding had not just been a celebration. It had been a reckoning, a correction. As she stood beside her mother at the end of the night, Elena felt steady. Respect, she knew, was not earned through status. It was required, or nothing else would ever be enough. The days following the wedding unfolded with quiet tension that lingered in every shared space Elena and Julian occupied. What should have been a honeymoon period felt instead like a careful truce, both of them moving around each other with deliberate politeness. Julian made visible efforts to distance himself from his family, canceling regular dinners, ignoring calls, insisting he needed time to think. Elena noticed the effort, but she also noticed how late it came. Trust, once cracked, did not reseal simply because someone finally acknowledged the damage. She spent long mornings with her mother, listening more than speaking, relearning the comfort of silence that did not ask her to shrink. Ruth never spoke ill of Julian or his family. She did not need to. Her calm presence reminded Elena that strength did not always demand confrontation. It demanded clarity. Julian's family, meanwhile, spiraled into damage control. Messages arrived daily, each apology more elaborate than the last, layered with justifications and fear. They spoke of misunderstandings, of cultural differences, of stress. Elena read them without responding. She had learned something essential during the reception. Remorse motivated by loss of power was not remorse at all. When Julian asked if she would consider meeting them, she answered honestly, not yet, perhaps never. Boundaries, she realized, were not punishments. They were protections. The first real fracture came when Julian suggested that perhaps the public revelation had been excessive. He framed it gently, cautiously, but the implication was clear. Elena listened, then asked him a single question, whether he believed her mother deserved what happened. Julian hesitated. That pause told her everything. She did not argue. She simply explained that her response had been proportionate to the disrespect. That silence would have taught everyone in that room that humiliation was acceptable if wrapped in prestige. Julian fell quiet, finally understanding that peace built on someone else's pain was not peace at all. As weeks passed, Elena began to see the marriage differently, not as a failure, but as a mirror. Julian started therapy, something he resisted at first, then embraced when he realized how deeply his upbringing had conditioned him to avoid conflict at any cost. He apologized again, this time without excuses, acknowledging that his silence had been a betrayal. Elena accepted the apology without immediately offering forgiveness. Healing, she told him, was not a transaction. It was a process. Ruth watched all of this with quiet attentiveness. She never interfered, never advised unless asked. When Elena finally asked her what she would do, Ruth answered simply that love without respect would eventually suffocate itself. That sentence stayed with Elena. It echoed in her thoughts during sleepless nights and long walks across the state grounds. She realized that whether the marriage survived or not, she had already reclaimed something more important, her voice, unfiltered and unapologetic. The inevitable meeting with Julian's family happened months later, not out of obligation, but out of closure. Elena agreed to attend on her terms. In a neutral setting with Ruth beside her, the atmosphere was stiff, stripped of arrogance. The apologies this time were quieter, less performative. Some were sincere, others were not. Elena acknowledged them without reopening wounds. She made it clear that access to her life was no longer automatic, that respect was not something she would negotiate again. For the first time, no one argued. In the end, Elena and Julian chose separation, not in anger, but in honesty. They recognized that love alone could not bridge the values gap exposed so brutally on their wedding day. The decision was painful but clean, free of blame. Julian left changed, carrying lessons he could not unlearn. Elena moved forward lighter, clearer, anchored by the certainty that she had honored herself and her mother. The story of the wedding spread quietly, often retold as gossip, sometimes as warning. But to Elena, it was never about spectacle. It was about a line drawn firmly and publicly, not just for herself, but for generations before and after her. The wedding had not marked the beginning of a marriage. It had marked the end of silence. And in that ending, Elena found a beginning that finally belonged to her. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.